right, thank you so much, Chelsea and County Executive. Really enjoyed that. Our next segment is going to feature advancing housing solutions with the NewDEAL Leader Grand Rapids, Michigan, Mayor Rosalynn Bliss, who was first elected and took office in 2016 as the first female mayor of her city. Before that was 10 years as a city commissioner. She'll be joined by Donald Rencher, who is Group Executive for Housing, Planning, and Development here in the city of Detroit, coordinating with a number of different departments across the city, and has been working since 2015 on developing inclusive housing and neighborhood redevelopment strategies. We'll be moderated by Sharon Géno, President of the National Multifamily Housing Council, who has spent 30 years as a leader in the housing industry. So Sharon, thank you so much. I'll let you take it from here with the Group Executive and Mayor Bliss.
Great, thank you.
Hello, hello.
Hello, good afternoon, hi. I'm Sharon Géno. I'm the president of the National Multifamily Housing Council, which is a national nonprofit trade association for 2,000 of the largest multifamily housing providers and the people that work within creating housing in that business. As the Congresswoman said, I feel like I'm here with my people. This feels really good to me. My father was a Democratic local official for 32 years. So much of what I learned about housing, I learned through his eyes. So I know the sacrifices you make, the sacrifices your family makes, and really appreciate your work. So thanks for having me. Housing is a kitchen table issue now. Having worked in this world for more than 30 years, it has never before come to the attention of local, federal, and state lawmakers and voters the way it has post-pandemic. As we know, access to quality housing creates a whole host of opportunities for households and families, from health to good nutrition, to good schools, to good jobs. Unfortunately, we are facing a housing shortage in this country. Our recent research shows that we are short 4.3 million housing units that need to be created between now and 2035 just to keep pace with our growing economy and our growing population. That's a lot of units. The supply has led to a lot of households being cost burdened. Fully 1/3 of American renters now pay more than 30% of their income for rent and utilities, and that number continues to grow. In Michigan, those numbers are even higher. I know in Grand Rapids, it's probably plus 40%, and in Detroit, about the same. So in certain communities, that number is even higher, and that is due in large part to shortages, in some respects following even the great financial crisis of 2008, but made even worse by the pandemic. We are also in uncertain economic times, as we all know. Interest rates are climbing. We had bank failures upon which the multifamily housing industry relies in order to finance housing. So we have a lot of challenges ahead of us. I saw a recent report by Moody's last week that we have lost an additional 500,000 affordable housing units since the beginning of the pandemic. So our challenges continue to grow. State and local lawmakers, and the federal lawmakers as well, are really faced with two sets of choices to help promote housing. One are sets of choices that help cultivate the creation of new housing and building more housing. The other one is a set of choices around regulating housing. The choices around cultivating housing are really, really important, and sometimes the regulatory framework that are being promoted, while they appear easy and can appeal to voters in the short term, they're going to hurt us in terms of our ability to create supply in the long term. Some of meeting the needs for affordably priced housing, especially at the state and local level, there are a number of things you can do, including investing your ARPA funds in housing, especially long-term housing solutions, streamlining or fast-tracking zoning opportunities, creating opportunities for tax abatement, enabling by-right zoning, and otherwise incentivizing that by-right zoning through mechanisms that also create affordable units as well. Other obstacles to NIMBYism, too, and breaking down those barriers are really important to the creation of more housing, especially affordable housing. There are a number of efforts on the federal level as well, and obviously state and local governments partner well with the federal government in terms of getting those resources. There are bills pending before Congress to improve the low-income housing tax credit and a new middle-income housing tax credit, which would most certainly help leverage private investment into those areas. The Biden administration proposed a housing supply action plan, which included a really interesting mechanism to incentivize local governments to break down barriers to zoning through federal transportation dollars. An interesting idea. Adequate reform and adequate funding for the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Many communities are using the Housing Choice Voucher Program, although it is onerous and costly, and there simply aren't enough. The previous speaker talked about 1 in 5 people having access. We have 1 in 4 people that have access to affordable housing that need it in this country today. So we have a lot of room to grow there as well. There are a number of policies that would also regulate housing, and those really undercut and disincentivize some of the opportunities for including supply. The federal government has put forward a Renter's Bill of Rights that would kind of step in the middle of some of the relationships that already are created on the state and local level, that relationship between housing providers and residents, and that's a cause for some concern. Also some questions around limiting the eviction process and creating a federal policy around that, which is going to be difficult given the differences in different communities across the country. State and local governments in many cases are faced with questions around rent control, rent stabilization, rights of first refusal, and other things. While understandably those are well-intended and seem to help people in the short term, they are long-term disincentives to more housing investment and really prevent us from creating that type of supply that we need in the future, and also have an exclusionary impact in many communities where it really creates incentives for people already in place who have access to the housing in those communities, and it disincentivizes and really boxes out predominantly low to moderate income families, many of whom are also people of color, who won't have access to that housing because the incentives are only provided for those that are already in place. So there's a lot of opportunity, however, for the creation of more housing opportunities, especially using that once-in-a-lifetime ARPA opportunity. So given how historic that opportunity is, can each of you talk a little bit about what your cities have done to use that ARPA funding for housing?
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be with you and up here with so many awesome people. I want to give a huge shout out to Mayor Coulter as I get started. Always good to see you as mayors. We steal ideas all the time, and even though you're at the county now, we're still in Kent County stealing your idea about setting an educational goal. So thank you for your continued work. But I want to give that highlight because all of us know that the work we do around housing is closely integrated to the work that we're doing around supporting educational goals, workforce development, public transportation. All of these issues are so interconnected. And so I'll talk about some of the things that we're doing in Grand Rapids around housing. So if you're not familiar with Grand Rapids, we're over on the west side of the state. We're the second largest city in the state of Michigan. We have a population of about 200,000. We're about 44 square miles, so pretty densely populated. We're the fastest growing city in the state of Michigan, fastest growing region. I and my entire team were very data-driven. We just did a housing needs assessment, and just to give you some perspective, we need to build about 14,000 housing units in the next 5 years just to meet current demand. It is an incredibly difficult issue that we're facing. And so going back to COVID, like all of you, we were in the midst of trying to figure out how do we respond to this global pandemic. And at the same time, we saw all of the issues around housing exacerbated. And so my philosophy is out of great challenge and obstacle comes great opportunity. And so how do we use this as an opportunity to try new things? My fellow mayors out there, I see some of you, we love the word pilot. Even though I've tried to shift us to start using the word experiment, people don't tend to like that word as much. So a pilot it is. And so we took the opportunity with our ARPA funds to not only to support the work that we knew was working and fill gaps, especially in capital stacks, but also to try new things. So a couple of things that we did at the city, and then I'm happy to build on with some additional details if you like. The first thing we did is that we wanted to make sure that we weren't experiencing the same thing that all of us experienced during the Great Recession, and that is a massive inflow of evictions. So we worked really closely with our district court to set up an eviction diversion program. So that was one of the first things that we did, and we brought in a number of partners to help us do that. The other thing that we did is that for a long time we had been talking about our response from our public safety departments, including our fire department, really drilling down into the data. Our fire department responds to over 20,000 calls, a significant portion of them actually in a very heavily concentrated area in our city were to individuals experiencing homelessness. And so we created, in 2020, we created a homeless outreach team. So we took a number of officers, 4 officers from our police department, 6 firefighters from our fire department, and then we partnered with our county to bring in mental health and behavioral health workers and created a homeless outreach team, trying to be much more proactive than just reactive and recognizing the fact that there are individuals, even though we had shelter space available, we still have a number of individuals who are unsheltered, who refuse to use shelter for a whole host of reasons. And so really actively going out and working proactively to connect with individuals and then to try to get them the resources they need. Some of it is just helping them navigate the system. Again, I love the word navigator. We can use them all over the place, but particularly as we try to respond to individuals who are most vulnerable, how do we get them the documentation they need to access resources? And so our homeless outreach team was started during the pandemic, and we have been able to divert individuals from both the emergency room and jail and get them into more appropriate services. We also have been able to partner with our county. We have a great relationship with our county, fortunately. I know that's not always the case for mayors, but in Kent County, we work really collaboratively, and we've been working with them and secured some additional funds from the state. So I want to thank my state friends who are here, and including Senate Majority Winnie Brinks. I know she's here somewhere. But we were able to secure funding, and we'll be opening up an 18-bed crisis stabilization unit, recognizing that that was a huge gap in our system. And then we've also just more recently taken $5 million from ARPA funds to fill in gaps for low-income projects that are shovel-ready but just can't make the capital stack work. And so we just funded, there's 8 different developments that we took $5 million, and we are helping them get over the finish line to make the numbers work for them. And those will all be starting construction over the next about 3 months, 4 months. So those are some of the things we're doing. I can share with you a whole host of other things as we look at not just responding to individuals who need housing, but really people who are struggling the most and who are unsheltered.
Yeah, that's pretty fantastic. I think the housing conversation is so robust, and you could go down homelessness route, you can go down the ownership route, you can go down the rental route, you can talk about people who are low income, you could talk about people who are middle income. At the end of the day, affordable housing is people who are not spending more than 30% of their income on their housing expenses. And as you said previously, it impacts so many parts of an individual's life. And so I think the first thing that we did was identify the biggest tool that provides, financial tool that provides affordable housing in the state of Michigan. MISHDA, the Michigan State Housing Development Authority, recently released a housing evaluation for the state of Michigan. Over 50% of the people who are housing burdened, meaning they're paying more than 30% of their income on housing expenses. And there was an absorption number of around 50,000 units that need to come down, are needed in the next 5 years for the entire state to really meet the demand. So it really was an eye-opening experience in reading that document. And so it was like, how do we address those issues? Right now, the biggest tool being the low-income housing tax credit. We also saw huge gaps across our portfolio. I would say about 2,000 units that we needed to essentially help cover those gaps. And so I think we did it as as a strategic leveraging moment with the help of Mayor Bliss and other mayors around the state to really push for the affordable housing funding to be pushed through the legislature. And I think right now we're at 150 million, and we're continuing to push to see if we can leverage state ARPA money in additional to our own city ARPA money. So the city of Detroit set aside around $50 million to be dedicated to our gaps. I could tell you that's helped us address maybe 30%, 40% of our projects, and we still have more in the pipeline that we need to address. So definitely using the low-income housing tax credit as well. If thinking about pilot issues, I talk to the mayor all the time. I always ask him who provides the most affordable housing in the city of Detroit and the state of Michigan. And it's not a developer. It's just usual like private citizens who are living in areas of low market areas, and they're providing rents at very low incomes. And so what do we do to help stabilize them to provide quality housing? They don't receive a tax abatement or incentive. They don't receive gap funding at all. And so our idea is to essentially, this was our pilot idea, is to create the housing services team. We have about 75 individuals that are hired, and we're going to be making this announcement pretty soon. You can call a number if you are housing insecure, and this is like a fine line between that and homelessness, right? You have funding, or you have money, or you have a job, but you are trying to locate quality housing, right? But they're not always provided by regulated affordable housing developers. And so these people will be essentially case managers working with individuals who call in. And I think we've identified approximately 1,000 units right now that are available privately that are at rents at low market or very low rents. And so we will help you get your lease together and get all the documentation you need to get connected to that lease to make you a viable candidate to live in those units. And it's a way to connect to the private market. Now we have to do some other policy, like push forward some other policy ideas to get those landlords more help, but it's a way to connect to folks to see, like, we can get you some affordable housing at the same time. What's also interesting about this particular program, our other pilot idea on the other side, is the Jumpstart program, where if you sign up for the Jumpstart and receive educational training, get your degree or GRE, no, that's, yes, yes, GED, sorry, I have so many things in my mind right now, that we will actually pay you a monthly salary to attend these classes, and we'll connect you to job opportunities. So for the first 6 months, it's $600 a month. The next 6 months after that, it's $400 a month, and the next 6 months after that, it's $200. Well, it's to essentially give you that additional money to help pay your rent, but also give you the educational training where we can connect you to job opportunities. Because at the end of the day, I cannot help you find housing if you do not have income. So it's a way to help address that situation. We also have a large amount of money going to Renew Detroit. We are helping people stabilize their homes, which is another big issue with people in the city. We have very, very old homes here in the city, and the biggest thing that people call in, we said, what's the most expensive repair people have? It's the roof. They could cobble something together to figure out how to go get the pipes looked at or get an electrician over, but a roof is gonna cost you $15,000, right? And so we essentially are giving priority to our Detroiters who have lived here the longest. They call in. We're going to be doing about 2,500 roofs in the city of Detroit, but for you to actually be eligible for it, you have to sign up for a poverty tax exemption, which allows you to not be, you will not have to actually pay your taxes on your home. So it's like we've seen an influx of people who are submitting to that, again, providing additional security and leveraging other programs as much as possible. And doing a lot more, I know.
No, I mean, you guys have both talked about some really creative ways to leverage and increase supply permanently. Are your communities also looking at regulatory opportunities to make the housing production process much less onerous for developers to help bring them forward? And if so, what are those?
Yes. Obviously, we all know that there are multiple things that it's a multi-pronged approach to solve this problem, and regulation is one of them. Zoning, obviously, is one of them. We're currently working on our master plan, specifically looking at growth and how do we encourage more housing and especially certain neighborhoods throughout our city. So a couple things that we've done is we made changes to our accessory dwelling unit, made that process easier, trying to encourage individuals to build ADUs throughout our city, especially in some of our densely populated neighborhoods. But then we've also looked at zoning, and we made certain types of zoning. We made it by right, and so corner lots, we looked at all of our corner lots. You can now by right build a fourplex. We looked at vacant properties. We only have about 500 vacant properties where we found that we could do some infill in our city, and we're looking at how do we encourage infill in those places, in those even looking at lot sizes. So many of us know that we have restrictions, and a lot of our lots at the time were not buildable, so we changed the size and really made those what historically would have been unbuildable lots more buildable and by right. So we're looking actively at what do we need to do with our zoning code. We're going to have a joint meeting between the City Commission and our Planning Commission, where we're going to go through and look at anything else that we can do currently while we're in the process of updating our master plan that we can change immediately to encourage more housing. But that is always something that we're looking at. We have low density, moderate density zoning already that encourages and allows for multi-units in low density neighborhoods based on the character of the neighborhood. And then we're working very closely with some of our nonprofit organizations and what we can do around using different tools to support housing, especially home ownership. We know that home ownership is absolutely key to wealth generation and building wealth in our neighborhoods. So how can we potentially couple brownfield TIF with community land trust to pay for affordability, where someone can actually purchase a home and own that home? And there's a package of bills right now in Lansing. It's a 4-package bill around allowing us to use brownfield TIF for cost of sale. So we're really hopeful. I see Senator in the back is shaking her head. She's been a great leader on this issue in Lansing. But we need more tools in our toolbox, not just to support large-scale housing projects, which are important, but we also need those smaller scale projects and infill, and we need to support home ownership. A huge priority for us.
And I know Detroit's been in this game for a long time. We were running out of time, but do you have a couple quick ones you want to add?
Yeah, so I know one legislative rule that, so the legislature just recently, whether they know it or not, but recently approved a bill that allowed the payment in lieu of taxes, a pilot, which is used along with a lot of tax credits. To be provided through municipalities, and they can actually issue those pilots to anybody who is providing housing at 120% AMI or lower. And that actually allows us to provide that pilot and that tax incentive to create the affordable units that are desperately needed outside of the typical affordable housing developers who are using like HUD funds, which we know it's not enough, right? So how do we create access for the private individual who are providing affordable housing opportunities?
You guys are very much ahead of the curve, so thank you for sharing those ideas.